My name is Paul Ainsley. I'm the City Councillor here in Ward 24, Scarborough-Guildwood. We'll be joined in a few moments by my esteemed federal colleague, the Honourable John McKay, who's the Member of Federal Parliament. For Scarborough-Guildwood, we have a special guest here this evening. John McKenzie is going to be our keynote speaker. He's the CEO of the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority, and we'll be joined by Joanna Kite, his colleague at the Conservation Authority as well. Before we begin, just a quick reminder that we are going to be recording the meeting this evening. It will be played again later on a number of YouTube and social media channels. So I just wanted to remind everybody the meeting is going to be recorded. And at the City of Toronto, before we commence every meeting, we like to do the Indigenous land acknowledgement. So I would like to say on behalf of everybody here that we acknowledge that the land we are standing on today is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I would also like to acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty Number 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississauga and Chippewa bands. I would like to read the African Ancestral Acknowledgement, and that says, on behalf of, once again, everybody here participating in the meeting, that we acknowledge all treaty peoples, including those who came here as settlers, as migrants, either in this generation or in generations past, and those of us who came involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. We pay tribute to those ancestors of African origin and descent. Thank you very much. I just want to remind everybody, as I said, we have a presentation from the Toronto Region and Conservation Authority. It's going to be followed by a question and answer session. I will ask people to please raise your hand by clicking the hand symbol if you have a question that you would like to ask anybody on the panel. I was very proud this past January, I was elected as chair of the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority. As many of you know, the Conservation Authority, or the TRCA as we like to say, is responsible for protecting and conserving our natural resources, including our watersheds, parks, and green spaces. I take this responsibility as chair of the board of directors very seriously. I'm committed to working with all stakeholders, including our member municipalities, businesses, and community groups, to find innovative solutions to the complex environmental questions and challenges that we're facing currently. Together, we can ensure that our commitment continues to thrive and enjoy access to the natural space that makes our region so special, in particular here in Scarborough-Guildwood. I'm very excited about the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead with the Toronto Region and Conservation Authority, and I'm very thankful for the trust that was put in me to lead the board of directors of the TRCA, and I'm looking forward to working with everybody and build a better future for our region. And just at the end of my remarks there, Mr. McKay, I will turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Paul. I apologize for computer difficulties, but of course computers work wonderfully when you don't need them and don't work quite so well when you do need them. So that's life in the modern era. Anyways, I'm pleased to join you and John tonight. The federal government, particularly the Liberal Party, has had a great working relationship with the TRCA, and we particularly appreciate their way of handling our environment. And John is a frequent visitor to 416 Caucus, which is currently a caucus I chair. So I'm looking forward to what John has to say, and then we'll open it up and have some interaction with those who are online, and maybe we'll ask John a question or two that he really doesn't want to answer. So there we are. Hey, John.
All right. Thank you, John.
Just for the record, go ahead. We love.
Sorry, go ahead, John.
We love your questions. Go ahead, Chair.
No, back to you, John.
No, I just wanted to say how appreciative we are of the opportunity to connect with yourselves, of course, and you have both been so supportive every time we've asked. You've been there for us, and in both of your roles over the years, and we are very thankful for the relationship and the strong working relationship we have. I did want to introduce my colleague, and you did, Paul. Thank you, our senior manager, Joanna Kite, who's here and has great experience working in the city of Toronto previously, and working in some of our other partner municipalities, and has really been getting to know Scarborough even better, because we do so much work in Scarborough that we should actually be, and this should be the Scarborough Secretariat of TRCA speaking to you tonight. We have so much going on in Scarborough, and so much work that is meaningful to the community. So it's a great pleasure to be able to go through some of that. So I do um, have Joanna here too, to answer the even tougher questions that John McKay may put forward. If there are others multi-part tough questions, I may ask Joanne to help me on those.
You
But
get the easy questions, John.
I
Joanna gives
okay.
them the difficult ones. Okay.
The yes, no, and I'll
Yeah.
qualify. But
Okay.
thanks so much. We'll go through this at a decent clip, because there are a number of slides, and the visuals are really important for you to see the type of work that we're doing. I also want to recognize, that obviously the federal government has been an amazing partner here on the work we're doing. The City of Toronto, we do all of this in partnership with the City of Toronto. We have great working relationships, obviously, with your counselor, but also with a number of the board of directors that are on City of Toronto Councilor, and the staff in the city. And so there's a great deal of partnership, and we'll talk about that later on. So just want to thank you for that. So maybe we'll go on quickly to the next. We'll start going through some of the slides. Just for a bit of background, since 1957, TRC has been delivering our programs and services that enhance the natural environment and protect communities from the impacts of flooding and extreme weather events, which are becoming even more frequent. Flooding is the leading cause of public emergencies, as we've seen on Toronto Island, and as we've seen in some parts of the city where there have been flood emergencies. And so that is our job, to help protect our communities. Next slide, please. So another part of what we do is we cover a broad area. Our jurisdiction covers 72 kilometers of the waterfront, from Mississauga over to Ajax. We also cover our watersheds, which extend from Uxbridge in the east over to the west, and Mono, Caledon, all the way out there in the west with the Humber River. We have over 4.8 million residents that live here. That's approximately 12, almost 13% of Canada's population within this jurisdiction alone. 21 municipalities that we view as partners, and we work with as partners to try to make sure we protect and restore the natural environment. Next slide, please. In addition to our chief mandate, which is to mitigate and prevent damage from erosion and flooding, we also do a lot of other work in support of our partners, in support of the communities. Habitat restoration. We undertake a lot of work on forecasting to help support emergency response work. I'll be up speaking to your colleague, John, and many of their team up there on emergency preparedness next couple weeks from now in Ottawa, on some of the work that we do, which is best practice in my view in Canada. We also do a great deal of work on recreation, and making sure that we help to maintain and upgrade and connect our public open spaces, and we'll talk about some of those projects like the Meadowway today. We do a great deal of environmental monitoring, a lot of that supported by the federal government through the various Environment Climate Change Canada, Department of Fisheries of Oceans, a lot of great work that goes on to make sure that we're monitoring the health and the state of the environment. Also, the province helps with some of that as well. Next slide, please. We review planning applications. That's a big part of our job, to make sure that development where it's within our regulated areas is planned and delivered and is done in a safe manner. So that's a big part of our work. And There's a number of tests we look at to make sure that's done correctly. We also review infrastructure projects. So if there's any pieces of new infrastructure, roadways, sewers, types of Metrolinx projects, things like that that cross through the valley systems or ravine systems near the shorelines, we review them and provide comments on those types of projects to help protect the environment. Next slide, please. We actively support education and recreation across the region. We work with lots of partners, mostly school boards on this front, but also with libraries, with community organizations. We try to find ways to connect with nature and to help people understand the natural environment, but also cultural heritage throughout our region. We have Black Creek Village, which is a big education hub within the city where we have many, many thousands of visitors. And we also have Courtright Center for Education. We have a number of education centers across TRCA's jurisdiction that are really serving more and more as community hubs to connect communities to the natural environment. So it's great, a really, really fun effort to try to make sure that we're connecting communities with nature. Next slide, please. We conduct a lot of work in support of our municipal partners and agencies across our region. For example, in your riding and in your ward, we do a lot of work with agencies to make sure that things are done properly. In the city of Toronto, for example, Waterfront Toronto is a big partner that we do a lot of the work for. To make sure that there's restoration is best practice. We make sure that projects are done in a way that we can monitor and maintain them, and that they're resilient. We have as well, for Parks Canada and Rouge National Urban Park, we help build a lot of the infrastructure to plan some of the trails, wayfinding, some of the projects in the most, sensitive manner possible. So that's a lot of the work that we do for our agency partners. And we have a lot of expert specialists with training and education in the fields of it could be environmental sciences, but engineering, restoration ecology, and many, many diverse experts that get involved and help project manage and design and construct infrastructure for our partners. Next slide, please. So here's some examples of the types of projects that we do. Obviously, our core work is really related to protecting. We also do a lot of restoration. We make sure that we're designing things in a resilient way, and we construct a lot of work and design and construct a lot of work in sensitive environments. So it's done in the the most sensitive and the safest way possible. We do a lot of work within the jurisdiction, within ravines, within the shoreline areas that are subject to our regulated areas, and like I said, it's really rewarding work because we can get in there, we can use a science-based approach to demonstrate that it is a net ecological benefit by inventory work, ecological inventories, monitoring to make sure that the intended outcomes are achieved. And it's really a lot of science-based work that we do. We build wetlands. We do a lot of that type of work to ensure that it's done in a way that is a net ecological benefit. For example, on the shorelines, a lot of it is unseen. There may be sunken underwater forests. There may be things like that that have been installed to support habitat along some of the headland areas and some of the projects that we're building right now. And it's a lot of effort is made to make sure that we can demonstrate that these projects are done in a way that it is really beneficial for the ecological systems and aquatic habitats, etc. And it's a lot of it's documented and is put into peer-reviewed science and literature and presented on at binational conferences or international conferences because it is leading edge in the world. Next slide, please. So organizations we work with are so important because we're really based on and our success is based on strong partnerships. These are some of the organizations we work with. There's a number of others. We also work with a lot of environmental and community organizations to make sure that we can deliver projects. And, Earth Day was a great example when we're out there with local groups, we're out there with provincial scale wide groups, and we're out there making things happen. And in your ward, in your riding, we also work with Waterfront Trust on projects, and we're looking at trying to do more with them as well. And I mentioned earlier, we're working with Rouge National Urban Park in Scarborough through Parks Canada. We're working on a number of projects that are really, really great partnerships. And even with the universities like University of Toronto Scarborough, there's ecological monitoring pre and post to demonstrate the effects of water management. And if we install parts of the Meadoway have been monitored to show the benefits in terms of the hydrological regime and addressing flooding and runoff and things like that. And it's all been done in a scientific way according to scientific methods set up by graduate students often. And this is great applied research, and it's all based on partnerships. Next slide, please. So Scarborough projects, and Scarborough is a little near and dear to me, having been born in Scarborough General Hospital, having grown up in Scarborough. And it's really great to see so many incredible leading edge projects being delivered, planned, delivered in Scarborough through early incubation of the Butterfly Trail. Former Councillor Glenda Bearmaker, a number of you working in support of all of that, has turned into something incredible in terms of the Meadoway project that I'll speak about later on. Amazing project. Again, it's leading edge North American reuse of utility corridors. And there's some excellent projects. These are just 11. There's actually smaller sub projects underway, but these are 11 of the big ones that are either nearing completion, and there will be some additional work done, but these are great projects that are underway in Scarborough. Next slide, please. So I will talk a little bit about the Meadoway. It's really one of our flagship initiatives that I mentioned came from the Butterfly work that was going on, but has really transcended and it's being looked at internationally as a best practice. The Meadoway is 16 kilometers in length. It's about 500 acres of the hydro corridor, the Gatineau hydro corridor that runs from the Don River and goes eastward. It's an incredible revitalization restoration project, but it's also community connections in terms of the active transportation that's being facilitated by this. All in all, we're looking for an investment by all levels of government and partners and philanthropists, and the Weston Family Foundation has been a huge partner on this. We're looking to achieve approximately $40 million of work in terms of restoration and trails and construction and infrastructure to make this corridor even better in terms of a restored meadow habitat with trails and connections that will really connect the Rouge National Urban Park in the east to the Don River Trail system in the west. There are 7 sections in the Meadoway, and I'll go to the next slide that just breaks it out into 7 sections. About 70% of the trail between all of these sections is completed, and we are really working right now to focus in on filling in the gaps within the system. And you can see that there's some of the complete sections, but there's some works, for example, between Kennedy and Brimley, we want to do some connection work. We want to do some work between Scarborough Golf Club Road and Military Trail. There's a lot of that being designed. Military Trail to Conlins Road. Some of that is pending redevelopment works and additional work that's underway at University of Toronto Scarborough campus. But it's really going to be an incredible achievement, and we're really excited about this. We have partners. The federal government is a partner on this project, and really great. City of Toronto, the federal government, and I mentioned the Weston Foundation, and we're looking to try to get the province to be more involved and supportive of the project as well going forward. Next slide. This section is one within your riding and within your ward. I just thought I'd bring it up. There's been some incredible work that's been completed here. If you've seen it north and south of Ellesmere, you can see the bridge connections that have been installed. You can see the switchback in terms of the trail that has been achieved. You can see the work that's happened to connect between the valley system up. And these connections have never been there before. This is something that is new, and it's something I've always thought about. Taking the bus across, looking over, wow, it'd be nice to cross that valley. Now you can. Now you can connect into Morningside Park. Now you can connect into the broader network. You can get up to Orton Park and Scarborough Golf Club Road. You can get to and from these areas, and I think it's an opportunity, to and that's been realized, and it's fantastic. And we've really made a lot of great achievements on this, and there'll be more of these connections made, and it's so well used. Anytime I'm out there now, there's so many people using this that would never have ventured into that part of the valley before. So it's great stuff. Next slide. So here are some views just to get a better sense of this from an oblique perspective. The design that we do consider safety. It really looks at the user experience. It's been informed by a lot of consultation and work. It's always looking at opportunities to restore and improve the ecology, and to do that in a cost-efficient way. This is next slide. From Ellesmere Road and Scarborough Golf Club Road, you can see the difference when you have these restored meadows, what that does instead of that. And so you'll see that we actually plow the fields first. There's a whole process of fixating nitrogen and making sure that we've got the right, setting for all of this to prosper and to be successful in terms of what we plant and how we build it. It's really there's a lot of science. We have a Meadoway handbook that's achieved a lot of international recognition for its science and I guess its understanding in terms of trying to do this and export this model, something that we're doing in Scarborough, exporting across the world, really, to it's a best case. And so that's what we're trying to do is to make sure that we're bringing a little bit of Scarborough to the rest of the world through this project. So it's going really well. Some of the benefits of the project include greater biodiversity, greater resilience, fantastic achievements. We've seen a lot of diverse species that have come back into the area. It's also been something that, when I mentioned resilience, it helps store water. When before, if you have a turf mown grass, turf field, Kentucky blue, or one of those species, it's a relatively hard surface and the water will run off. There will be more sheet flow. And through the science, and I spoke about some of that earlier, now there's more of the water that percolates more slowly, and it allows for less flooding in downstream areas, and again, a much more vibrant and resilient environment. So it's great stuff that's underway, and you can see some of the species that are coming back into this area. So there's a lot of education associated with this. On to the next slide. We have a lot of schools that are located right up against or near the Meadoway, and so we try to work with those schools to make sure that they're involved, engaged, supporting this. A lot of times we'll have students that will raise some of the pollinators within their classrooms, or will get involved in plantings within the Meadoway and understanding how this how they can make that contribution to our ecosystem. And so there's a number of projects underway all across this area. Next slide, please. So now I'm just going to get into some of the other more smaller scale projects, but very important to the communities that we serve. For example, there's a lot of aging infrastructure. This is a riprap revetment, which is a series of stones and that were put in place to help protect on erosion. But some of this is quite old. It's not as old as me, so I don't know what that's saying, but it's a 1970s structure. I'll put it there. I'll just leave it at that. And this is something that we're going to be doing some detailed design and replacement on to make sure that we can address some of the erosion issues present in this part of Highland Creek, south of 401. I know that's of a concern. One of the great projects that I'm very proud that TRC is advancing, it's going a little slower because we've got to do a lot of consultation to make sure we get it right, is the next project in Morningside Park. It's called the Morningside Legacy Project. And I know I've spoken about this before with both of you. This is something that will involve now 2 kilometers of trail, It's going to be a fantastic opportunity to engage in the environment, but it's something that reflects a lot of perspectives and a lot of input from our Indigenous partners in a number of communities that have been part of many, many multi-day workshops. There's a great deal of detailed design underway right now, and we're looking to bring forward a part of the project, the first phase of the project, over the next year or so. We want to make sure that we get it right. And so there is a lot of thoughtfulness. There is a lot of discussion to make sure that we have this connection to the land involving Indigenous partners. And it's been a great collaborative. And so we're continuing that work within Morningside Park to do this. And now it turned originally from one area. There was interest in having a trail and interpretive stations throughout. So that's where we're moving towards. And so it is taking a bit of time to get it right, but it's going to be something we're all going to be very proud of as we move forward. Here's a project. The next project I'm going to speak of is just to the east of that, short walk under the bridge and over towards University of Toronto Scarborough campus. Really, really amazing. I know both John and Paul had talked to me about this project, and also Jennifer McKelvey and I and others have had many visits out here with staff. But this is a project where we had part of the trail that was actually falling into the river. There was a lot of erosion taking place a couple years ago. I'm showing you the after version. There were a lot of impacts, and this slide shows some of the impacts and the issues with the bank, falling into the river essentially, and the trail was damaged. I ride my bike out there quite a bit, and so it was a hazard situation. We have done a lot of fantastic work. The project was completed in the fall, late fall, early winter this year. This past year. And so I have seen so many people out there using this section, this segment of trail, and it's something that really has been a great project that's been put in place and well used. Going back a little bit to the west, I'm just going to show you a photo of that. I mentioned some of this in the earlier Meadowway slide, but there are these great connections that have been put in place. These are Corten steel bridges that have been wide-span Corten steel bridges, and there's been a series of them put in place within on the west side of Morningside Park, leading up towards Ellesmere. These have just greatly increased the connectivity, and it's something that when people see this, they can't believe this was done. They can't believe it's a vista from Scarborough, west of the hospital. It's an amazing achievement, and it's been coordinated. There's a lot of infrastructure in the ground. We coordinated this with Toronto Water. We've coordinated this with to make sure that we can do additional plantings and do restoration work around it. We've taken out invasive species while we do this work as well. So always looking for that net ecological benefit. It's so well used by the community, and it's just a great project. Really, really happy about this one. Moving on, again, some more examples, and like I said, these are incredible vistas in the middle of the city, and so some great work here showing you the trail and the trail connections around Morningside Park that have been put in place that link the area. So a little bit more work just to do some final asphalting in some places, and to make sure that the other work that had to take place related to some of the infrastructure in the ground by our partners in Toronto Water was completed, but it's moved on really well. Great, thanks. So now I'm going to move over to another really important project for the future of Scarborough that we are advancing, and it's part of a much larger Scarborough waterfront project. But there's always been this gap. And so when there was the Royal Commission on the Future of Toronto's Waterfront, and even going back to the 1960s and 70s, people wanted this vision of a connected waterfront, connecting up through the Toronto Centre Region Plan and previous plans up to the Oak Ridges Moraine. A connected waterfront has always been something that is challenging because of private ownership right up against the bluffs. One way to try to achieve this is to look at connections that can be achieved around and below the bluffs in a way that's done in a very sensitive way There's a lot of erosion. We've seen some major landslides. And so it's a very sensitive environment. We have to do a lot of work. So we did an environmental assessment for the lands east of Brimley over to Highland Creek. We are now moving into the areas between the RC Harris plant at the bottom of Victoria Park, Fallingbrook, in that area, over to Bluffers Park and Brimley Road. So that's something that we are moving forward, and we're doing it will be an environmental assessment that will be a multi-year process. It will involve a lot of meetings, community discussions, consultation and engagement, and we're really looking to try to make sure that we get a lot of community interest, a lot of input to make sure we get it right. I talked about how we use a science-based approach. We are looking to try to achieve a net ecological benefit with this project. It's something that we're going to be applying all of our lessons learned to make sure we get the best benefit. There's aquatic habitat benefits, terrestrial habitat benefits, shoreline stabilization, and a lot of other important social and community considerations as well, in terms of, how do we make it the most accessible and safest, in terms of wayfinding and access points, and how do we do this in a way that can also celebrate our cultural history, Indigenous perspectives? How can we incorporate some of these design elements into our project and get some more feedback? And how can this project help benefit our communities, including businesses on Kingston Road? And there's a lot of discussion that's going to take place regarding this project, and we're just thrilled to be able to move this forward. It's been a long time in the making. I was speaking to David Crombie and about it yesterday, who obviously was in a big role in identifying this the gap in the Great Lakes and the Lake Ontario Waterfront Trail when he did the Royal Commission report. Very happy that we're getting on with this work. He probably wants it to get on with it even quicker, but he's very happy that we're moving ahead with this project. And so stay tuned for more on that as we go forward. So the next project I'm briefly going to talk about is our headland work and work around Bluffers Park. There is a great deal of work that's going on to make sure that we're managing erosion from, wave action is something that hits us pretty hard at times. There's some sedimentation that we also have to do some occasional dredging on, but really what we're trying to do is make sure that with more extreme weather events and high lake levels that have hit us and that we've learned about from those big 2017 2019 events, what we're trying to do here is to make sure that we have a resilient shoreline and that we're protecting the park. We've done some great work that you can see on the west side. You've seen those phases that have been completed. We even built in a walkway for surfers, if you've seen that, if that's your thing. But there's been some great work to make sure when we do these types of projects that they're done in a way that will benefit fisheries, but it also really makes it accessible, and it's going to stand the test of time. We have you can see by some of the construction and the photos there, it's stackable, non-stackable armor stone. There's a lot of these are many tons that are put in place to make sure that this will not move and this will be resilient to the wave action, and especially the southeasterly waves that hit our shoreline sometimes and create a great deal of damage. Next slide. So some of the upcoming work, there'll be some more work on the headlands taking place. You'll see some stockpiling of materials and some of our construction people working this year on this part of the project closer to the marina. So you can see some of the benefits and some of the differences in terms of how things were getting swept away beforehand, and then progress and work that happen, and just to make sure that we are not impacting and that literally the trails are not blown away like they have been in some parts of the Great Lakes. Next slide, please. So the Scarborough Waterfront Project EA, this is another important ongoing effort to implement the previously approved environmental assessment we're continuing on with our efforts to move forward with the detailed design and hopefully soon construction of some elements. We're focused in right now on the west segment of the project. We're looking really at detailed design. We're doing a lot of work on Brimley right now. As we speak, we're reaching out and working with owners that back onto Brimley Road. That's been something that we want to make sure we've got the design right. We're moving ahead with a multi-use path design for that area and doing a final check-in with some of the property owners around there to make sure that you know it's designed in a way that makes sense. Getting close on that, and then I think one of the things that again working from the west to the east. We are looking also too, we're doing some work. You may see that there is a part of the trail closed, and I've got some photos later on, but there is a little bit of work that's going on the east side by Highland Creek right now as well, where we're doing some repairs and doing some immediate repairs where there was a damaged part of the shoreline just west of Highland Creek. Next slide, please. So you can see some visions. I mean, we've got a lot of work. There's a lot of this. This is something that we really think is going to be a success. We have some of these paths there. They're not as formal as it could be. Sometimes on some sections we have, on some of these sections we have actually stones, hazard materials that are actually blown up into where people are using trails. And so we have to make sure that we develop a trail system within this area that is going to be safe for people as well. So that's something that's underway right now. But you can see the visuals, what we're trying to achieve here. Next slide. So I mentioned this right by Highland Creek. This is, I think, photos from about a month ago. I was out there. A number of people have been out there looking at this. There's been the damaged part of the trail. It was very difficult to get through this section. What we've done now is to, again, bring in some of that really strong armor stone to make sure that we've got a solid, I guess, protective base. And then we've also added a new base into the area to raise the trail up so it'll be resilient, and it is coming along quite nicely and should be open, I hope, within the next month or so. So that's coming together pretty quickly, and eventually we'll do a little bit more work down the road in that area, but it is something that will see the waterfront trail functioning. We did some work between, and the next slide show this slide shows some work that's been done on a very heavily used part of the trail between Highland Creek and I guess Rouge Hill Go, Port Union. It was getting damaged. It was really damaged in those high lake levels, and there was some erosion, and you could see some of that in the photos. It was getting unsafe in some cases when it's very busy. It was unsafe for cyclists and pedestrians. So we wanted to make sure that it's going to stand the test of time. And so there's a beach curb that was installed, and a lot of repairs that took place to make sure the waterfront trail is going to remain. It is such a busy stretch of trail, and so we want to make sure that is protected. So next slide, please. Rouge River, and this is now part of Rouge National Urban Park and the beach, and there were some issues with the beach. There was again, some impacts, and the beach was unfortunately off limits because for most of the summer there was a lot of issues present. So we worked with Parks Canada to do some work to as soon as we could, as soon as there were no breeding birds there, we got in there and we worked to make sure there was the beach was put in place, and so now we're going to continue working with Parks Canada to make sure that the shoreline in that area is protected and the waterfront trail is protected in their area. So was talking with Parks Canada yesterday about this, and this is something that we are working closely with them on, and I know John will bring it up when he has the opportunity, but this is something that we think is really important to make sure Rouge Beach is accessible. Great. So I'm gonna move on to some great work that we're doing with in the community, and I'm so happy. We had an incredible Adventures of Salmon Festival last year. Lots of great energy. A lot of people attended. I think it was record attendance. Almost 2,000 people attended the Adventures of Salmon Festival, and then there were other members in the community as well that have been involved in spotting fish and reporting them using our application. And so it's a great way to connect the community. Um, what we're trying to do with this is to recognize and to bring back, or to at least recognize some of the functions that are going on within, that's part of Highland Creek, within the Rouge, within the streams within TRCA's watershed. Um, there were Atlantic salmon that were present here, but were actually made extinct in 1898. There's been a huge effort to bring back that type of salmon within our jurisdiction. We've had some success in Duffins Creek, in the Little Rouge. We're trying to bring back more of the Atlantic salmon. And there's a lot of other introduced salmon that run up and down Highland Creek. And so it's really an interesting, I guess, lesson as to how things function. And so we were trying to get people more engaged and understanding what's happening here. We've had these are big salmon, 15 pounds plus, running up and down the river system. So it's really great. Next slide. We work with I mentioned partners. We work with a lot of partners on this. The Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters, our Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, the Toronto Zoo, Science Centers. A whole bunch of people are involved in helping raise awareness of this, and it's a great event. So that was something that happened in Morningside Park, and we're going to repeat this year. And great attendance, a lot of fun, DJs, learning stations, whole bunch of games, and a whole bunch of activities present for learning. I've included a couple other big projects, and I really want to. One of them is all the way out in, I guess, call it the old city of York, the Rockcliffe Riverine Flood Mitigation EA. This is a project that we've been working on with the City of Toronto with huge support from the federal government. The Rockcliffe area is an area, and I think some of you may recall there was one incident. It's a very flashy, floody area of the Black Creek, which is a tributary of the Humber River, where there's a lot of channelized parts of it. It's a highly urbanized watershed. So when there's a storm, the water really comes down and it runs off, and it really peaks quickly. There was one incident where actually two people were trapped in an elevator and saved by Toronto police. In one case, in a business, pretty dramatic, almost drowning in an elevator, and thankful to TPS for getting in there and being brave enough to do that. But there's been a lot of flooding incidents. It is our highest risk flood vulnerable area in our entire jurisdiction. And we've had some great support from the federal government to help address some of this in partnership with the city through the Disaster Mitigation Adaptation Funding Program. And so it's one of those areas where we're undertaking a lot of work, where you've got this historic infrastructure and we have to upgrade it. So on to the next slide. We've done an environmental assessment. It's been a very, I guess, significant project, and there's a lot of work that's gone into it. We come up with a preferred design. Because of the historic nature of the area, we do have to do some widening of the channels. We do have to realign some roads. We do have to extend the Jane Street Bridge. We do have to put in place a number of elements of updated infrastructure. But we're also, like I mentioned before earlier, we're also looking to try to make sure that there's benefits environmentally, socially, in terms of trails, and making sure that we do some good work in the community. So that's something that we're working on, and I just wanted to raise it because I thought there might be some members of the public that might be interested in our work out there. So I did include a few slides on it, even though it's all the way out in York and not in Scarborough. Turning to something, if it's okay, I'm just going to turn to something that's a lot closer to home. Sylvan Avenue, which a lot of you know, backs onto the Scarborough Bluffs, and is in that one stretch that goes, I guess, west of Guildwood, that whole stretch that extends over westwards into there. We did very recently have a landslide on this area behind the bluff, so it shows you how real and how significant some of the erosion risks are in our jurisdiction. there was a significant landslide that occurred. Our TRCA staff and forestry staff working with the City of Toronto have removed hazard trees to allow for access for our TRCA crews. We're going to start taking debris away and cleaning up this area. We're looking at also restoring it, of course. There is trail closures in effect. I know a lot of people do walk their dogs, cycle in this area. So we have had to close off this section of the trail, but we're working on this as quickly as we can. There are permissions and there are safety issues present when there are, trees that are hanging over the Scarborough Bluffs that have to be removed. So we're working on that. We don't want to have workers put at risk. So we want to make sure that that's all done safely. So we have shut down that portion of the trail with the city. And, please be patient. We're doing our best to make sure that we can reopen it safely. And there will be a program of trying to restore what we can in that area and to make sure that it's stable first and foremost, so that risks are diminished to the extent we can. So really, I guess maybe I'll move on to our ongoing priorities at TRCA. We really want to maintain our momentum and make sure that we're continuing to advance our mandate, making sure that we are also seizing those opportunities for more recreation, more work along the shoreline to restore habitats. We want to continue supporting the community with our partners in government, but also in other organizations and the institutions, even the Scarborough ones like Centennial College, like University of Toronto Scarborough campus, working with them closely. We are looking forward to continuing to, look at more funding opportunities. And I know that's something that's a constant discussion point between you, Chair Ainsley, and John and other members of his government. But the federal government has been very supportive of a lot of our work, and we see opportunities to advance our shared mandates. So just really appreciate the opportunity of being able to speak to you today and to share some of what we're doing in Scarborough. There's actually a lot more. This is just an entree, but really appreciate the opportunity to be here today, Joanna and I, and I guess over to you as to questions and happy to assist.
Perfect, John. Thank you so much. That's a wealth of information. And, not only as a member of the board of directors of the Conservation Authority, but I'm the chair, very cognizant, very proud of all the work that gets done in the community by the Conservation Authority for the residents here. At this point, we're going to move on to the question and answer section of the meeting. I'd just like to remind everybody, if you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand by clicking the hand symbol at the bottom of the application bar where the three dots are, and the hand symbol will be there. For those of you joining us by phone, please press *3 to raise your hand so we know you want to ask a question. And just a subtle reminder to remember to lower your hand after you have asked your question by clicking the symbol or pressing *3 again if you join by phone. Thank you. And I'm just going to check for questions. And I believe, and I guess I should turn my ringer off too. The first question is from Elizabeth Reynolds.
Very much, and good evening to everybody. I think that you've done an amazing job there of describing all of the different things that you do. I have two concerns. The one is very local because I was down at the Bluffers Park today, and they were actually filming a series there, so it was quite interesting. But there was a lot of erosion. Trees looked like they were falling down on the side of the road of Brimley, south of Kingston Road, when you go down there. So I'm just wondering if you're looking at fortifying that area beside the road down. And that's one. And the other one is, all of the amazing work that you're doing to conserve our beautiful city. And can we have any guarantees that due to housing pressures, which I was also listening to the Housing and Planning Committee today at City Hall, that our conservation areas and our parks will not be used for developing housing on them? So those are my two questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So first, I want to try to address that issue of the trees. Thank you for making me aware of that. I'll inform our team, Elizabeth. That was trees south of Kingston Road. We are working very closely on the design of a multi-use trail that is on the east side of Brimley Road, that is, going down the bluffs, and it is a very steep and deeply incised slope in that area. So our project largely relates to implementation of that on the east side of Brimley Road, but obviously we can take a look on that. Did you notice were the trees that you're speaking of on the west side or the east side? Do you recall? Okay. We can.
Elizabeth, did
Sorry.
we lose her, Alex?
Yeah, just a second.
Sorry.
On the east side,
Oh,
side.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll definitely have our team take a look at some of those issues and see if there's anything that can be done. That is within, our study area. If it's on public land, it should be something that hopefully we can look at more closely and potentially address. On private land, there's obviously access permissions, and there are tree permitting issues with the city's forestry department that we have to work through as well. There's tree protection policies, there's a whole number of things, but thank you for flagging that for us, and we'll definitely look at it. On the other question that you asked about, we have, through the changes, there's been a process of changes to multiple acts, and the Conservation Authorities Act that we are largely governed by has been changed 3 times in the last 3 years at least, and then a number of regulations have changed as well, and that's something that the provincial government's been doing. There has been an indication that we've been asked to look at our portfolios related to potential opportunities for housing, but most of our land is environmentally encumbered. Most of our land is environmentally sensitive land. So we're not looking for anything like that right now. We haven't been getting any more detailed information from the province as to what may be of interest in terms of housing. I guess we'll have to stay tuned, and we are, obviously looking at our lands from the lens of trying to protect and restore our properties. And where we do have facilities, though, we are looking for opportunities to potentially bring in more community uses, things like Black Creek Village and places like that. But that's not something that's within our control. The province has control of the regulatory framework, and if there are any proposals, we obviously have to look at them very closely and pay attention and be involved. And but to date, so far, there has been nothing aside from an announcement about part of the science center, but no details associated with that. So that could be geared towards the parking lots. It could be, it may not be about what's in the valley. It may be leading more towards what's closer to Don Mills. So we don't know. We're trying to find out more, and we'll, I guess, have to stay tuned.
John, I know
Thank
you
you.
avoided that question entirely because you didn't mention the 4,700 acres that is apparently being set aside by the government of Ontario for apparently housing. A very dubious set of 4,700 acres, and almost inevitably encompasses lands on which the TRCA has some responsibility, certainly lands that are close to environmentally sensitive and important areas for the Rouge Park. Can you, within your delicate and diplomatic way, describe to our listeners what's involved with particularly the Rouge Park, the lands over to the Duffin Creek, and the potential impact on TRCA jurisdiction lands and indeed on the federal park.
Sure, I'll try. And this is something that has been something that the province has been, I guess, very clear on their direction. There have been previous plans, including the Greenbelt Plan, Central Pickering Development Plan, the Rouge Duffins Agricultural Preserves Act, and a number of pieces of legislation that have been removed or rescinded for the lands and that are referred to as the Duffins Rouge Agricultural Preserve, with the intent of achieving housing on some of those lands. Those were lands that were previously largely owned, almost totally owned by the province of Ontario, that were then sold in the 90s to farmers for the purposes of farming. Those protections have now been removed and they're being targeted for housing in that part of what was formerly in the Greenbelt. They have been removed from the Greenbelt, and again, with the objective of achieving housing. So, as for the Conservation Authority, we actually have a few parcels within that are owned by TRCA within the Duffins Rouge Agricultural Preserve, and in other parts of Pickering nearby. We've actually brought through, and the chair is very aware of this. We had a report that went to our board of directors a couple of months ago saying if there are any lands within that area that are, our TRCA ownership, we would, and I know that there's the Rouge National Urban Park right there. If there is an interest in them being included in the Rouge National Urban Park, we're happy to sit down and have more discussion with Parks Canada staff and federal officials about potentially putting some of our holdings in there. But right now, we understand that there's, ongoing discussions between the municipalities who have publicly expressed their, I guess, opposition, the Durham region and the city of Pickering, to the proposal. There's discussions underway between the province and them, and so we are standing by and seeing what will come forward. We would obviously, if there is any decision to allow housing in there, which obviously seems to be the intended objective of the landowners and the province in here, we have Petticoat Creek, where there is the need for a watershed plan, and we would want to make sure that there's more work done to understand what potential impacts of urbanization are on the Petticoat Creek watershed, on parts of the Duffins Creek watershed that haven't been studied for potential urbanization. We need to understand what those are. We need to probably mitigate them. I would assume there would be quite a bit of potential impacts, and we would need to mitigate that. So at the same time, the federal government, through your Minister of Environment and Climate Change, Minister Guilbeault, Stephen Guilbeault, he has launched a study of the area around Rouge National Urban Park to address impacts of urbanization, to understand impacts of urbanization and what that means for the future of Rouge National Urban Park. And I understand there's a suite of public open houses that the federal government is engaging citizens on that are coming up. So that's something that is another thing that's at play within the same geography. So we do have a lot of activity going on. We are obviously interested in making sure our primary mandate that I talked about earlier, the protection and management and mitigation of erosion and flood impacts are, that's something that's really important, protecting the environment, addressing hazards. We're out there and we'll be vigilant, and we'll continue to monitor all of these different things and to provide our science. We've got a great deal of science that we can contribute to the debate and discussion, and we'll continue to do that.
Thanks for that fulsome answer, John, and I hope you have a job in the morning.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
I don't know. Ask
Well,
Paul.
I'm sure Paul will protect you. I think for our listeners, to put it in less delicate terms than John has used, the reason that the Rouge Urban National Park exists is due to the citizens' demands over many years to force governments, municipal, provincial, and federal, to protect that area. And there is now some real and present danger to that area by virtue of some of the decisions taken by the provincial government. So if the provincial or the federal government has a very limited jurisdiction, and it can only initiate an environmental review if there is a project to be reviewed. Hence the invitation, if you will, the invitation to participate in what citizens might wish to say about the environmental sensitivities between Duffins Creek and the Rouge, the significance it would be for all of us who live in that area, and I would say, the increasing awareness that climate change is a reality for all of us, and disaster and flood mitigation in particular is something that has to be built into all of our planning. So the days of bulldozing farm fields are over, and that appears to be the intention of the current government. So thus endeth my homily.
All right. Thank you, John. Our next question is Yvonne DeTulio. Yvonne, can you hear us? Go right ahead.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, super. Thanks, John, for the presentation. I got to commend you. And hi, I got to commend you on the Meadowway projects. I grew up in Scarborough and often hiked all kinds of trails, and what you guys are doing is amazing. And my vision is diversity corridors like our sister city, Montreal. It would be wonderful to have something like that here. My question, though, is around the area that surprisingly you haven't mentioned, the Doris McCarthy Trail, which is it's really surprising to me because it's a heritage place. It's a highly used trail, especially since COVID, and it's one of only two kind of access points for Scarborough. I guess three, count the Guildwood, of course, but it's really highly used. And I want to come back to where the part where you've described where you've had that slide. That was just to the east of the Doris Trail. Just to the west of it are two big holes, which I know I've communicated to TRCA, so I'm sure you're aware of it. It used to be one, now it's two. Something's going to happen. But I'm bringing this up because TRCA has studied this area extensively. And you mentioned the Scarborough Waterfront Project, you mentioned the environmental assessment, the entire bluffs, Bellamy Ravine, and other ravines leading to them are in a natural hazard area, prone to flooding, prone to erosion, unstable slopes. And this is in Kingston Road, when it comes to that, the trail just by where you showed the slide is really darn close to the bluffs. And especially down at Bellamy, it's about, 50, 60, depending from where you count from, meters from the bluffs. It's really the closest access point. So we've got pressures on Kingston Road to build. Fine, it's an arterial. But my question is two-part, and the first one might be more important than the second because the second might not be within your control. My first question is why these studies, and you've got another one going west of us, why the studies of the area conducted for the environmental assessment aren't being reviewed when both large developments and infill housing, which we got big properties, they're huge. Their underground garages are huge. When these things are coming forward within this hazardous area, and we're all on a floodplain, sorry, not a floodplain, like the same watershed, why is the potential effect of erosion not considered given the EA? How is that EA actually being used? That's my first part. Housing is only going to increase. Impermeable surfaces are going to increase. Water flow will be changed and diverted. Our trees are disappearing, especially the mature ones. If you're interested, I can send you lots of photos. You know better than everybody else. Those are the things that keep the soil together. So that's the first part. And then the second part is, given the proximity to Kingston Road in this area, is there any chance of expanding the TRCA's area of concern, especially when it comes to that trail there up to Kingston Road? There is, I'm aware of definitely one big 300+ unit development with 2.5 deep parking lot within 50 meters of the not ravine, but the the actual ravine and trail, the beginning of the trail. Couldn't that be expanded? Sorry for taking so much time, but that's my two-parter. And thank you.
And thank you, Yvonne. It sounds like you might have a Master's of Science in Planning or something. No, just- it's a great question, and thank you so much. I really appreciate the question. I guess maybe I'll first address the environmental assessment, and that part of the Doris McCarthy Trail is located in a really important segment that is I guess it's part of the central segment of our Scarborough waterfront project. So that's something that is it's obviously was approved. There was a larger environmental assessment at a little bit higher level. We haven't done the detailed design for that segment as yet. It's still something that we're working to try to get funding to do the detailed design of with the city and our partners. We do want to do the detailed design of it um, to get it further advanced for potential implementation. We're always trying, that's like one of our chief objectives, is to get shovel-worthy projects shovel-ready by doing the detailed design so we can then implement it if we are able to access funds. So that's something that we are going to do. I think, I can follow up with our team and continue to have some more discussion about making sure that there isn't any um, I guess, planning or intensification or anything that would be happening in terms of people, even additions or, like you mentioned, underground parking that may create a risk or compromise that. I can look at that a little bit closer with our team, and I will be following up with them. And Joanna and I can follow up with the project team on the waterfront file on that. So that's something we will do, and I'll undertake to do. Yvonne, the other one about the regulated area, um, I wish you could talk to our friends at the province, because there's a lot of interest from them and others in terms of reducing our regulated area and what we do. And so we've been working very closely and making sure that the regulated area is, not too broad. And so you're coming at it from a different perspective in terms of looking at the potential for expanding our regulated area. It's a different perspective than I'm used to hearing. Most people are looking at shrinking our regulated area. But on that one, I know we do have very strong guiding regulations that are actually being reviewed at the moment. Under Section 28 of the Conservation Authorities Act, there are detailed regulations. There's work by the province right now to create a more generic regulation um, based on everything that we've been dealing with, and I've been involved in a number of the provincial committees. Everything is kind of moving towards reducing the extent of our regulation. So shrinking the areas that are part of our regulated area. So that is how things are trending right now with the province. And I know these things change over time, and there's ebbs and flows in terms of policy and how policy is made based on the governments of the day. But right now, our regulated area is what it is. There's been a great deal of work to achieve that. So I don't see that regulated area expanding, at least in this period of time, based on every indication that we've had from our work and very close work with the province on this. So but what I can tell you is that I know that within the regulated area, obviously we're involved in the planning process. Outside of it, we're not as involved, and um, and that's another factor present here. But I do appreciate that. We will look into that situation around Doris McCarthy. It's a really important area. Amazing views. If people haven't been there, it's just beautiful. And we can look at some more of those issues more closely related to the design of the waterfront once we get some funding. And I know Joanna and team are always working on trying to leverage more funding from our partners so we can get into the detailed design. Joanna, is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I think you pretty much hit everything, John.
Thank you very much, Yvonne, for those questions.
Perfect. We will go on to our next question. Its initials are on the screen, MCG.
Oh, we probably need to make this the last question.
Okay, I'll make it a doozy then. Forgive me.
Okay, and knock it out of the park. Yeah.
All right. I appreciate everybody's time tonight. Thank you. And I want to say I really appreciate the TRCA's work. I just came off of running a 10-kilometer right before this meeting, and it is magical along that trail every time. So I really do want to acknowledge that it really is a gem in the city. And my sister's got Rouge Park in her backyard, and I'll go out there on the weekends and take a run there. I can't wait until all of it gets connected. It's really lovely. I do want to probe a little bit on, so when I listen to this, I hear a lot about the projects and the work, and it's all commendable. But I think I'm looking for the notion of campaigns. We're all here, and we're all interested, and we've got all of these organizations, but we're missing the corporate and the citizen involvement. So I think of Earth Day, just this past weekend. I registered for it because there's no, I guess that there wasn't anything close to where I was. So I registered as an individual, and I went out in the pouring rain. I did a little bit of cleaning up. But on the City of Toronto website, it was indicated there was no corporate sponsor for it. And that, I think, is just shameful for the biggest city in the country, for the financial center of the country, for there to be no corporate sponsor for the most visible day, Earth Day, of the year. And so when I look at all of this and I go, we didn't have a corporate sponsor for that as a city. So other than the Weston Foundation, how are we looking beyond government to get involvement and to help really push the needle on some of this? I don't know who has that answer, but that is, when I look at it, it feels like a real gap.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. We are always looking, and there are other community members, there are private citizens that do step up from time to time. Toronto Region Conservation Foundation is a partner with the TRCA. It's got its own board of directors, but we do try to reach out and reach out to look for corporate partners, corporate donors. We do have some criteria around that. We want to make sure that corporations that are being involved are also doing good things on an environment front, or we're very conscious of that as well. We have had some support from industry. We did have a really big cleanup at Highland Creek that actually had a lot of industry folks that came with heavy equipment and did help us out on doing some cleanups. We have a Look After Where You Live program at TRCA that has a number of corporate cleanup days. So there is some of that does happen. You can find out more at our Toronto Region Conservation Foundation website. You can find out a little bit more about that program. It's a Look After Where You Live program. And we are always seeking more corporate sponsorships. I know that's something that we would love to try to achieve. And I know we want to get more of that happening, even with, we very recently have been able to secure some funding from, we saw the 407 helping out and doing some monarch habitats and things like that. We've been able to secure some funding from other entities out there as well. It's something that we're trying to continue to do. With Metrolinx, even if there's impacts, we're trying to do more compensation and redirecting plantings into areas that can benefit from it. But I think on the corporate sponsorship, yes, we're open to ideas, and yes, we do want to try to continue to encourage that in our work. And on the Meadoway in particular, it would be great to have even more businesses in Scarborough helping out. I know institutions like University of Toronto Scarborough campus are a partner in terms of and are looking at seeing how their lands can contribute to the project, but it would be great to get other partners as well. So I do share your interest in having more corporate sponsors, and through the Look After Where You Live program, through our foundation, we'll keep looking for them as well.
I'm heartened to hear that. I'd love to receive more information about that. I've got my counselor here, so I'm sort of looking at him. I'm very much, even putting the corporate thing aside, I'd really like to see more citizen involvement in some of this. we can all pick up a couple of pieces of garbage on our run or on our walk, or
Amen, sister. Amen.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a great
anything
Earth
that
Day.
helps support an individual who does that, or a group of individuals. I think that's great. And as much as I follow the TRCA's work, I regret that I didn't know about the foundation's efforts. I apologize.
Oh no, it's fine. It's a parallel thing, and we try to support that. And we have some campaigns geared. We have one major one is the Meadoway campaign, and then that other program is the Look After Where You Live, where we do have major companies and that send their employees out for a day of work in the field, and we try to support that and that type of thing. So it is something we had a lot more interest now that people are back out there post COVID, and there is more of that happening, but we always want to generate more. And so please, please, please take a look at that Toronto Region Conservation Foundation website. It's got some details on that. So thank you very much again for the question.
I think I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. At this point, I think we're going to wrap up for the evening. There are a few people left that still had questions. If you'd like to email your questions either to myself at councillor_Ainsley@toronto.ca or to John McKay's office, and we will definitely make sure that they get answered. At this point, we've reached closing remarks. I'm going to let our guests speak first. John McKenzie, if you'd like to, any closing comments you'd like to make?
Oh, I just think there's a lot of energy and a lot of interest in some of the work. It's very real to everybody. I mean, if someone's out there running on our trails in our shared land, that's real. That's fun. I want to continue, to communicate. Please reach out to us through your elected representatives. Really, they're great champions for the work we do, and I know John is always a champion in Ottawa for us, and is always available. And I know Paul is your leadership as our chair and everything. It's putting us in a great position for the future. But I do want to please note that there will be that major Scarborough waterfront project. Please stay tuned for that. We are looking to get as much input once we launch that next phase of consultation on that environmental assessment. We want to make sure we get it right. We get all the different perspective, and so I want to hopefully I didn't say anything that will prevent John and Paul from having me back at a future meeting, or Joanna and I from coming back. But we want to come back again if it works, and really again really appreciate the opportunity. Joanna, is there anything you want to share?
No, I don't think so. I just, we're very happy to work with the community and answer all your questions and give you the support that you need. So please reach out if you do have any questions to our office, and we're here to help. So thanks for having us.
Thanks, Joanna. Mr. McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Ainsley. I want to thank John and Joanna for sharing their time with us tonight. I think the standard, John, really is, will you have a job tomorrow morning? That's the real question here. John
will make sure he does.
Okay, good. So the boss says you've got a job. That's good. John, your knowledge of Scarborough is impressively thorough, and it doesn't happen that often. That we run into people who have such a deep and detailed knowledge of the community in which we live. And I particularly appreciate the work that you and Joanna and the TRCA does in our community to make it a tremendous community in which to live. But I do want to pick up on the last questioner's comment about citizen involvement. We can get people who are knowledgeable and helpful and do detailed studies and like yourselves, and we can maybe get some corporate sponsors. But at the beginning of the day, the middle of the day, and the end of the day, it's, do the citizens want to live in an environment in which they have a clean environment, one in which we can all be proud of. And I would say that there's some work to be done there. So if there is a takeaway from tonight, citizen involvement. Every day is Earth Day. We live in an environment that needs constant attention, and TRCA, the noble and able job that it does, has its limitations. It's the rest of us that need to pick up the slack. So whatever can be done to encourage, enhance citizen involvement, I think is a worthwhile project. So again, thanks, John. Thanks, Joanna.
Thank you so much. And I do want to encourage anyone that's interested in getting a little bit more involved, and please take a look at our www.trca.ca, our website. And we have an events calendar, an events page. There's a lot of stuff. And I mentioned it's almost like we have a Scarborough Secretariat. There's so much going on in Scarborough. Please, please, please come out if you're able and be involved. We want you to be involved. We want you to get if that's your thing, you want to get your hands dirty, do some planting, you want to do some work. We've got lots of good things like that. We've got lots of great other types of activities too. And a lot of committees and a lot of working groups and a lot of great, we have an incredible youth council. We have over 350 youth council members now. It's an amazing group of energetic young people that are making a big difference now, and it's under a regional watershed alliance. It's just a great energetic forum to be involved into. So really want to encourage you to be part of our events and upcoming activities. So please take a look at that event schedule. Thank you.
Yeah, and John and Joanna, thank you so much for all of your hard work and your dedication, your amazing work. As you said, John, maybe we should have a Scarborough Secretariat for all of the work the TRCA is doing here in Eastern Scarborough. But I also know it's the tip of the iceberg for all of the amazing work you do from Lake Ontario up to Lake Simcoe and Whitby out to Mississauga. There's so many environmental challenges that we're facing, and I'm proud of the work that TRCA does, taking the lead on all of them and protecting our environment and fighting climate change. Can't thank everybody and all of the employees at the TRCA enough for all of the work that you're doing and being here with us this evening. And you're more than happy. You're welcome back at any time.
Thanks again. Take care, folks.
All right. Have a good evening, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
John, where'd John go?
Okay.
He wasn't supposed to leave that quick.
That's
All right.
We're in
He did all the
practice
work.
session.
I have to
Yeah.
finagle him back.
Yeah.
I will call him. Thank you, Joanna.
Thanks, Joanna. Okay.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
John. Have a good
Thanks,
night.
everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye, good night.